Now we got some important information here from certain types of graphics cards melting down when trying to run the Diablo 4 open beta, possible information pointing to what the next character is going to be released here for Diablo 4, a bunch of information in regards to different bug fixes, and then some very important questions answered from the devs. So I'm not going to bear the lead on you. Probably the one that's going to catch your attention the most is that some of these graphics cards are getting nuked by Diablo 4, and specifically they're a version of the 3080 Ti. And just to shout it out, we're over here on PC Gamer. Now, once you scroll down here, you can see down here it gets to the actual one that you want to look for, and that's the 3080 Ti, specifically made by Gigabyte. Now, this had happened before, not with 3080s, but 3090s, and that was a game called New World. Now, these 3090s actually had a soldering issue on the EVGA version you see highlighted there in red. They don't know exactly what the issue is here with the 3080 Ti in Diablo 4. It's probably just more of that Diablo 4 is putting a ton of stress in certain situations on the graphics card, causing some sort of malfunction. Now, they do go over different types of things you can do to try to mitigate this issue and hopefully have it not happen. So you can open the NVIDIA control panel, right click on the desktop, scroll down to manage 3D settings, change the frame rate to on, and then change the frame rate to a lower one. You can probably just pick the refresh rate of your monitor. So 60 hertz monitor, just pick 60. If it's 144, pick 144, 120, pick 120. It's up to you, but just go ahead and pick a lower frame rate is more specifically the issue. Click apply and then restart your computer. Now, part of the issue that I had heard is that during load screens and possibly during different cutscenes, for some reason, the game was trying to push out like 1500 frames a second or something like that, and that's obviously not going to be a good thing, and there's no reason for it. You can't see it 1500 frames a second, and who needs to see a load screen super fast like that? So here is kind of a quick, try to get it to not happen to you if you got one of these 3080 Ti's. Next up, are they actually hinting towards there being a Crusader or Paladin class in Diablo 4 in the future? Well, my boy Macro Bio Boy seems to think so, and he lays out some great points in a video he released recently. So in said video, he goes over a bunch of different reasons why he thinks so. The Paladin Vigo, which is one of the NPCs you have to talk to for a particular quest. You actually look at the skills that this NPC is using, and they look very reminiscent of skills that you would probably see in the game if you were playing a Paladin or Crusader character. Also, not to mention, they did do stuff like this before, whether it was the Assassin in Diablo 2 after they eventually did have that enter the game, and also for the Necromancer in Diablo 3. He lays out a bunch of different reasons and in great detail. Absolutely great video. I'll put a link at the top of the description. Make sure you hop over and check that out. I'd be very surprised in a future expansion if we didn't see a Crusader or a Paladin. Here we are over on Eurogamer. They actually had a chance to ask the devs questions about the beta that we played over the weekend. Now, some of these answers here are very interesting. The small text right under the title here, some of the things they asked about were the queues, balance, the butcher, couch co-op, dungeon design, and there's definitely more. First up, did you have a metric for success for the weekend? Something in particular that you were looking at? And if you did you meet it? He said pretty much here they had 6 different hot fixes and they got more stability on the servers. The queues went down, so that was a big thing that they were looking at. Their goal is to see how many people were going to be playing because we really wanted to test the servers. So we've exceeded the numbers of players that we thought were going to be able to get in. So it sounds like pretty much for the beta, their number one and almost their only goal here was to see if the servers could handle it. So they decided to ask him how many people were actually playing in this early access beta. Rod Ferguson says, I don't have the final numbers, but we went well over 1 million players this weekend, because I did see 1 million people got over the level 20 on one character in order to get the little Poochie riding around on your back in the little backpack. So because there were so many people last weekend, and we presume with the fully open access this weekend, are there going to be any restrictions on players next weekend? Rod Ferguson just says, no. On all the different platforms, anyone who wants to play will be able to. So in this very long question here, and then Rod Ferguson had quite a long answer. I don't want to put words in the mouth, but I'm pretty much going to paraphrase here. The question is, should you expect queues essentially at the Diablo 4 launch? And this is a very long way right here of saying probably, yeah, there's probably going to be queues at the Diablo 4 launch, and they're going to do their best to mitigate those queues, but it's going to be tough for them to kind of get around with so many people trying to log on at the very same exact instance on launch day. Now, there's a question and answer here I do want to know. It's not necessarily about him answering the actual question, but he does go off on a little bit of an extra note here that I do want to note. So the question is there anything you're worried about in regards to the open beta coming, when presumably there'll be more people playing? And Ferguson says, we've made a lot of progress forward. The reason we're doing these tests, I mean, part of it is we want people to get their hands on it and see if it's a great experience or not. And fortunately, once we got into Saturday, the last 2 days have been phenomenal in terms of feedback, positivity. But beyond players getting it into their hands and trying it for themselves, and to get balanced feedbacks and other feedbacks that Joe can receive, it really is about making sure we can run it at load. So this is what they said. The main thing is they wanted to get in and see if they could really run everybody jumping in. But I just thought it was important to note that he talked about getting balancing feedback in the answer to this question, because I know a lot of people were saying the Barbarian, much underpowered relative to the Sorceress specifically, and possibly even the Rogue. So mentioning balancing feedback there is probably something that a lot of people out there want to hear. And now right up here at the top, a lot of people had seen the Butcher, and it was really, really a hot topic. He was very difficult, absolutely slaughtering people, but here they kind of describe him as a reverse treasure goblin. He comes in absolutely wrecking. You can definitely get gear off him, but I personally never encountered him. But down here a little bit further, they talk about there is a minimum level restriction, and there might be a few other things here, but it's meant to be very random, very unexpected. I'm hoping to encounter the Butcher here in the next beta coming up here and hopefully get a chance to take him out. And do you think you're going to run into any other absolutely slaughtering monsters like that randomly popping up like the Butcher? That's what they asked right here. So are there any other enemies that get similar kind of treatment to the Butcher? Joe Shelley, I think he's head developer, I believe, on the project. Yeah, we'd like to add more enemies like that into the game, and because the game is a live service, we have a lot of opportunities to do that. So you can expect either at launch or in future seasons, they're going to add in some crazy different stuff that'll come in and attack you. Who knows what they're going to add, but being a live service game, like they said, could come in at any time. So in this long, winding questions right here about balancing in the game, and Joe Shelley gives what I think is a good answer down here. It is a live service game once again, and he mentions that pretty much talking about balancing, obviously they were looking at the technical aspects, but from this beta, they were actually having an opportunity to look at balancing in the wild and to make improvements. So that's pretty much the gist of this paragraph right here. There is just naturally going to be gameplay style differences between things like the Barbarian and the Sorceress, and some might come out a little bit better, a little on top relative. But they do mention here that they are looking at different balancing stuff. Like he said, out in the wild, once us players get our hands on it and really go over everything you can do with these builds. So anyone that thinks that one build is way overpowered than the other, which I kind of agree with, in my opinion, the Sorceress absolutely wrecked, they are taking a look at that. There are some important patch notes coming out of the early access beta that you're not going to have to deal with coming into the beta this weekend. First of all, there was an issue with the Yeshiva spawn timer. So instead of the issues they had before, they're going to actually spawn at the correct times. So if you are playing this beta, make sure you note that March 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m., 10 p.m., and then midnight Pacific. So that is technically the 26th, but it's at midnight. That is the times that this world boss is going to spawn. So if you want to try to get this boss, you have to play exactly at those times on that day and at those times. So you're getting FOMO'd into having to play at those times, whether you want to play or not. Now, in general, there's just some more stuff there that's fixing like queue times, and then where there was like those invisible walls in certain areas and stuff like that. Feel free to pause and look over all those fixes, but there tends to be a lot of the issues that were with the beta did get a little bit of love here.